Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Built Different podcast. In studio with me, I have Jeff Roorda. I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Well, that could take up the whole show. I don't even know where to start. Jeff Roorda. I spent my entire adult life in public safety, pretty much. Started when I was 21 as a police dispatcher, 911 operator with the St. Louis City Police Department. Was there for about 2 years. That was back when they had so many police officers, if you could believe this, so many police officers that they were in a hiring freeze.
What year was that?
That was 86 I got hired.
Okay.
So I stayed there for 2 years, straight midnights the whole time. And then I went out to Arnold PD and worked there for a little while as a dispatcher, and then they hired me as a police officer. I was going through the police academy and working as a dispatcher at the same time, and finished that, and then was out there for 13 years, and then about 2.5 years I was the police chief and city administrator in Kimmswick, that next town south of Arnold.
Okay.
And then while I was there at Kimmswick, I got elected to the local ambulance district board and then the local fire district board. And then I ran for state representative in 2004 and served in the House for a total of 8 years. After my third term, I worked briefly for the State Department of Public Safety, and then that's when the St. Louis Police Officers Association came to me and asked if I'd be interested in being their first business manager. They were in the midst of union negotiations with the police board. This was before city control happened, they knew that I had a relationship with Mayor Slay and had negotiated contracts with the city before, and that they appreciated the fact that I'd been one of their biggest supporters during my time in the legislature. So hired me in 2011, I guess that was March of 2011. I started with the Police Officers Association, and I was there for 12 years, and now I'm taking it a little easier. My wife and I own a medical billing business, and I kind of come and go when I want to. A cop buddy of mine yesterday called and said, "You want to play golf today?" So I took the afternoon off, and just taking it a little easier now.
So you're halfway retired, essentially.
Yeah, I don't want to say semi-retired,
right.
But partially retired.
Yeah. So. You can dream about it then.
Well, I can. My boss is pretty nice.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we got so much to get into, but let's start from the beginning. So you started dispatching. How was that? You're dispatching in the city in what you said, the 80s?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It was it was pretty wild back then. That was kind of when crack was everywhere, and that was a lot of drive-by shootings during that period. There were still 9 districts. And, they had a lot of cops back then. The third district was gigantic. They had, I guess, on midnights, they had 12 beats, before, the overlay cars went home. I think they had like 18 beats or something like that. So the old third was big. The old 7th was big and busy. The 6 has always kind of stayed the same. Everything's changed as they've moved these maps around, but the 6 has always basically stayed the same and was, but 6 and 8 were on one channel. 1st and 2nd were on one channel. 4th and 5th were on another channel, and then 3, 7, and 9 all had their own channel, I think is the way it went, if I remember right. So yeah, I did that for 2 years, and it was foot pursuits and car pursuits, and a lot of stolen cars and shootings, and kind of the same thing that we got back to in the 2010s.
Being a dispatcher, I always kind of refer to them as like an orchestrator. You're almost conducting a band, like you're trying to move people to certain places and get them certain places, and it's just there's a lot going on, especially in the city. I don't think anyone envies city police officers, let alone the people behind the scenes.
Yeah, and it's really less stressful being out there in the middle of the shit. The dispatchers, they just have to sit there and bite their nails and hope the whatever call they just dispatched turns out okay. Yeah.
I remember listening to my radio traffic from Nate and I shooting, and there was, they edited the video, but I listened to the actual tape, and there was but by the time one of us said, we still don't know who said it, but someone said, "I'm shot," there was probably 5-6 seconds where there was nothing said. And that dispatcher just sitting there like, what's going on? So.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I'm sure the audio of your ordeal was harrowing.
And I'm sure you never know as a dispatcher when that day is going to come, because, like with ours, we instantly see a vehicle, we start a pursuit, and that's the dispatcher's life 9 times out of 10, Someone just keys up and says, "Hey, I'm in pursuit of a vehicle."
Yeah, and we didn't lose any coppers the whole time I was there as a dispatcher, but, I can't remember the guy's name, Kramer, I think, in Jennings got killed, interrupted a burglary, and that was on midnights, and there was a big car chase and hoopla that followed that, but city didn't lose anybody in that 2 years I was there.
So you leave the city, you go to Arnold.
I went to Arnold.
Dispatching.
Yeah. I was a volunteer firefighter at the time, and Arnold PD also dispatched for all the fire departments around northern Jefferson County. So I knew all the dispatchers. They knew that I worked in the city and they had an opening, and they said, "Hey, you ought to apply for this. The police and fire side of it." And so I went and interviewed, and they hired me, and it was, I think back about this now. There was a time there where I was working full time as a dispatch, going through the police academy, and I'm old enough that back in the day, once you had your first 120 hours in the academy, you could carry a badge, be commissioned. So I was also working as a reserve officer for a police department down in southern Jefferson County. So it's like, when did I sleep? But I finished the academy, and then they hired me at Arnold, and I was on the road for about 3 years, and then I made a lot of felony arrests, mostly drug arrests, but I had a pretty good eye for stolen cars too. But the guy that was coming out of narcotics, the chief asked who he should put in, and he goes, "Roorda." Like, there's no question about it. He's he makes more felony drug arrests than the rest of the department combined. So put me in narcotics. I worked undercover for a total of 5 years. They didn't like you to be in too long, so I did a 2.5 year stint. Came out for a while, and then went back and did another 2.5 year stint. But over 100 undercover buys, through the door on over 100 search warrants. Last year and a half of my time in narcotics was mostly spent on a task force with DEA and city narcotics and customs that we were working with some pretty big dealers coming out of Texas. 23 federal indictments out of that case.
And this is what year?
My first time, so I started on the road in 1990, and then I went into narcotics the first time in 93. Came out in the end of 95. Went back on the road for a while. They put me in the detective bureau for a while. Let me tell you, general case file detective is the worst job I ever had in law enforcement. You just never feel like you're caught up. You're always sitting behind a stack of manila folders, and you don't feel like you're really a policeman anymore. Right. You're just moving folders from one side of your desk to the other. I didn't like it much, and I made it pretty clear that I didn't like it. And there was an opening, and so they put me back in narcotics again. But like I said, the first stint, it was mostly undercover. The second stint was mostly like longer term investigations.
Right.
We did a couple different wiretaps, and we did a really big meth lab case with DEA that the agent that was a case agent from DEA said nobody will ever get a bigger meth lab in St. Louis than Roorda did, and when we did the search warrant on the guy's storage locker, aside from the $125,000 in there was a 500,000 mini thin tablets, Sudafed tablets. They like to use the mini thins back then, which is just mind boggling. And
that's a lot.
If you did, I know you did federal cases. The feds, when they prosecute a manufacturing case, they prosecute it based on how much dope you could have made with the components you had. So that guy got like 32 years up in Yankton. So that was a big hit, and then those wiretap cases were both really good hits too.
Yeah. So you, after you're done at Arnold, you go where'd you say you went after?
Kimmswick. Okay. It's kind of a little river town, kind of a lot of shops and restaurants. My college degree, I got a master's in public administration, so city administration, that sort of thing. So they were looking for a police chief and a city administrator, and I could kind of fill both jobs. So
what was the change of pace like for you?
Well, it was. I enjoyed the police side of it more than the city administrator side of it, and was in the police car as often as I could be. They wanted me. They wanted me to come to work in a suit, and I wanted to come to work in a uniform and still get out there. We had a riverboat. The Robert E. Lee was moored at the riverfront there in Kimmswick, and I wasn't out trying to make arrests, but I'm driving to the parking lot, and any place that's got a restaurant has got kids working in the restaurant that go out to their car and smoke dope. And I look over on the side of the parking lot, and it's very clear to me what this kid's doing. And I walked up to the car and said, "Hey, what do you dump it out?" And he handed me his ID. I was fully prepared to give him a warning and just let him go. And I looked at his ID, and I'm like, "Hey, you're under arrest." And he's like, "You didn't even remember my name yet." I said, "I know, but if I arrest you, I will have arrested 3 generations of your family, and I just can't resist doing it." So I showed up to the booking area with this kid, and they're just like, "You're supposed to be a police chief. What are you out making dope arrests for?"
So obviously there was probably a little bit of a slower pace there, and then you go into. Where'd you say you went after that?
Politics.
So you go straight into politics. So that's flip over. You're not in policing anymore, and you're doing that. And let's talk about that.
Yeah, I was ready for something different, and I'd already gotten elected to the local fire and ambulance board, which was one meeting a month, kind of deal. So no big deal. But our state representative decided suddenly that he wasn't going to run for re-election, and I talked to my wife and my 3 daughters about it, and my mom and dad, and decided, it was just something I wanted to try. I won a very close 3-way primary by 83 votes. Then I had, I think, the closest general election race that year for the state legislature as well. I won the general by 276 votes. So 2 close elections to get there, but I really enjoyed my time in the legislature. It's a humbling experience. It's a beautiful building. We got one of the most beautiful capitals in the country, it was a chance for me to stand up for the folks that wear a badge. Cops, firefighters, paramedics. I was always sort of the go-to guy for people in public safety, and I was on the public safety committee the entire time I was there. I was a ranking member of that committee for, I think, 6 years altogether. There wasn't much in the way of public public safety legislation that came through that I didn't have my fingerprints on somewhere.
So you kind of got to shape a little bit of the usher into, well, a little bit of like modern day legislation for policing and stuff, because that was probably in the, I mean, what years were you in?
I first got elected in 2004, and then in 2010 I lost my election.
Okay.
So in 11, our term was over in January 2011. So not shortly after that, the POA came to me and asked if I was interested. So I took that job, and that was again sort of a continuation of what I did in the legislature, because I was always their go-to guy for city police legislative issues. And I had all the relationships in the legislature, and I wasn't going to run again. And at the time, this is before I changed parties, I was still a Democrat, and Governor Nixon, who I had a close relationship with, was really hounding me to run again. And I said, no, I got this job at the City Police Union, and I like it, and they're happy to have me. I'm happy to be here. And he finally, every 10 years when they do the census, they redraw those maps, and he reached out and he goes, did you see your new map? I looked at it, and they'd give me all the best territory. So I'm like, okay, I'll run if these guys are okay with it. And they're like, when I went back to the board of the police association, they're like, yeah, we'd love to have you back in Jeff City for 2 years. We'll just, you can work on Mondays and Fridays, and then, when you're in session, and then when you're out of session, come back full time. So that's what I did for 2 years, and that was the 2 years that city control went through the legislature. So I was there for that. Kind of have seen it come full circle now. And I'm really glad to see the department go back to state control. But I worry a little bit that people think it's going to fix everything. And I got to tell you, the end of the state control was not great for the city police. They hadn't had the matrix funded for 2 years, and they weren't going to fund it that next year before we got them to change it around when we got the union contract. But the discipline, people's cases would sit for 3-4 years and just not even get a hearing. It was really bad at the end.
I mean, you've kind of seen everything. So let's talk a little bit about this. I mean, there's a big topic right now that the city coming back under state control. You've seen it both sides, and you've been a part of the association for, was it both sides, or did you? But you were at least in politics at the time that we were under state control.
Yeah,
right?
When I first came on board, we were still under state control, and then I guess it was, they took a couple runs at it, and then I guess it was 2014 that it passed. Does that sound right? So I saw both sides of it, and it's again, when we first went under city control, we had Mayor Slay, who was, if not an ally, at least sympathetic. His chief of staff, Jeff Rainford, was a ball buster, but so was I, and there was a mutual respect there. And so we'd get in screaming matches, and then we'd always find a way to get the place where everybody was happy. The director of personnel, Rick Frank, was really good to us, the entire time he was there. So when we first came under city control, we had a union contract was the envy of not just every police union in the state, but every public employee union in the state, and even police unions from other states. When we'd go to national conferences, we'd tell them what we had in our contract, and they'd be in awe. So we had a great disciplinary system in the union contract. We had raises. The time I was there, we got about $12,000 in raises over the 12 years I was there. We things were really okay at the beginning, and then Lida came into office. She came in and she thought the progressives were her friend, and it took her a couple of years to figure out that there was just no way to you can't make them happy. The goalposts are just moving at a tornadic speed, and there's no way to make them happy because they don't know what they want. You can't give them what they want because they don't know what they want. And it broke Lida's heart that she couldn't be the darling of the progressives, but after a while she just said, I want to deal with people who actually will do what they say they're going to do. And she turned back to us, and then we had a good relationship with her for a couple of years. But once Tashara came in, and to compound that, they have Kim Gardner over in the circuit attorney's office. They were just anti-police. They ran on an anti-police platform, and
the divide, I feel like, got bigger.
Yeah.
And it's grown to what it is now today in St. Louis. And it doesn't stop. It just seems like it keeps getting bigger and bigger, even with this state control. So you kind of mentioned something. I know a lot of the guys that I've talked to are so excited about state control, thinking that it's going to go back to what it was. And you obviously share some insight on that. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, let me tell you, first, when I was still there when we were started to move towards the idea of going back to state control. And there were two schools of thought. There was one that I was kind of an advocate of, was the legislation that existed, the remedy for the city not complying with what the statutes said they had to do to have their own police department was that the department would go back to state control. So there were two routes they could have gone: either sue over the city not obeying the statute, basically, or go back to the legislature and have them just legislatively take the department back under state control. I don't know which one would have been quicker. How it took them 3 years or so to get it to the legislature. Litigation moves slowly too. On the back end of this thing, the city's suing, and they have that Hancock argument about is this new spending or not? Is this new activity under the state constitution? And it's really, there's no analogous case, because you're talking about a police department that was under state control, was allowed to come back under city control, and is now back under state control. Is that new activity, or is that just going back to where we were before? And it'll be a difficult question for the courts to answer, because it is a case of first impression. We really don't have, I don't think, a good analogous case, and these questions of constitutional interpretation, if they're appealed, they go straight to the Supreme Court. The circuit court you'll hear the case, but there's no court of appeals if because it's a constitutional question, because of Hancock, it'll go straight to Supremes, and hopefully we'll get an answer quick. Because if you notice, the city didn't try to enjoin the law. They didn't ask the courts to not enjoin the law. Well, it seems like to me that if you think you got a winner, you just let the meter run. Because if the city wins this Hancock argument, the state's going to be on the tab for whatever millions and millions of dollars the city's police budget is. A judge could say, hey, this is a violation of Hancock. You got to pay the city back for what they spent on their police department. So hopefully it doesn't come to that, and hopefully the law is in their favor. But that's the danger of the whole thing.
Right. So it doesn't sound like, it it doesn't sound like there's really a clear-cut answer on whether it's going to be good or bad, or whether we're just repeating the cycle, I guess, kind of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the question is, you know, does having a board of police commissioners get us back to where we were, where we had a handle on crime, where at least downtown was fairly crime-free. I mean, I never thought you'd see the day where downtown became this frontier justice nightmare, which is what it is now. Like I don't let my kids go downtown for anything.
I remember when they were building the soccer stadium. Nate and I were shot. We come home, and I think a week after that, they had just finished production on the parking garage. If you know anything about that area, that parking garage sits right across from police headquarters. Supposed to be the safest place in town, right? And I read an article the day after they announced finishing all of that. They discovered that there was bullet holes in part of the parking garage. And I have that article somewhere. It's from Fox 2, but I was like, it's just the surreality of like what downtown has become, you know, is that's right across from police headquarters. And it's, you know, supposed to be like a new upcoming neighborhood, safer and all this, and there's bullet holes now in the parking garage.
Yeah, for you to have a safe community, potential criminals have to have a fear of apprehension and prosecution.
Yeah.
And if it's just apprehension, or if it's just prosecution, or if you don't have either, which is what we had under John Hayden and Kim Gardner, we had a feckless police chief and a prosecutor who made it clear that she didn't want to put criminals in jail. She only wanted to put police officers in jail. So, I mean, you're just basically grabbing a megaphone and telling every criminal in the city, it's a free-for-all.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to prosecute you. Do whatever you want. And that's what we had. And it's really hard to undo that. You know, the criminal element is so pervasive now, and so daring, as you saw, that it's really just hard to scale that back. Now, we have a really good circuit attorney now, I think. Gabe Gore. I did never, you know, he was at the U.S. Attorney's Office when I was working dope, but he was more on the white collar side, so I really never had a case with him. But the prosecutors I did, the federal prosecutors like Mike Fagan and Dean Hogue and Tony Decker, the people I did cases with, all really spoke highly of Gabe. You know, obviously Jay Nixon, John Danforth, Ed Dowd are people that are his, you know, former law partners. And, you know, those are just icons in the legal field. You know, so he's done a really good job. I think that's helped a lot. But until they get back to a fully staffed police department, you now have, you know, the opposite problem where we had with Kim Gardner with some apprehension and no prosecution. Now we have a prosecutor that's ready to prosecute, and the department's, you know,
in shambles.
The real number is more than 400 officers down. If you go back to where the department was when Tashar, what the budgeted strength was when Tashar came into office, it's more than 400 officers down. And that's the big question mark, is how I think state control can fix a lot of things. I'm not sure how it fixes that. I mean, where do you go to, like, if you shoved every spot, every desk in the police academy full, how long does it take you to replace 400 people if nobody's even leaving? Yeah.
And it seems like it's still, from what I'm hearing, I mean, state control came into effect, you remember, I mean, it's been, was it the beginning of this year that state control came in?
It was just, it really didn't come into effect until the governor appointed the police board commissioners 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Anytime it took effect, it could take effect anytime up till July of 26. So the statute said by, I think, July 1st of 26 that the governor had to appoint the police commissioners, and he didn't wait. He's like, we got a problem, I'm appointing them right away. Yeah. He appointed 5 really good folks to the board of police commissioners. I know I know Eddie McVeigh, and I know Chris Saraceno and Brad Ortega well. They're all very pro-police, smart guys. I don't know Don Brown, but I know how close he is to the governor, and how much Governor Kehoe, who deserves tremendous credit for the courage and the dexterity to get that bill through. As soon as he took office is really impressive. And then Sonia Jennings Gray, I don't know, but I know her husband, and I know that Rick Frank, the former director of personnel, says nice things about her. So I'm hopeful that she'll be good too.
What can they expect from this board? I mean, because it's definitely different than what we've had. I mean, what will be, I guess, their main goal and their main purpose? Like, is it to drive to get more officers? Is it to drive to kind of structure the department differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think they should be tackling the big issues like staffing,
manpower,
and discipline. The discipline is Tashara made it a colossal mess out of the discipline system by doing away with I can't remember what they used to call it, the review, the 15 days or less suspension. You went to a review with your peers, basically. The summer hearing board.
Okay.
They got rid of that, and they put it all over every discipline, no matter how small. Then went to the Civil Service Commission, which has about a 3-year backlog too. So getting discipline done fast. If someone's a bad cop, they need to be done fast. They need to be gone fast. Yep. If somebody didn't violate policy, if they didn't do anything wrong, they need to be acquitted right away. So that's a big part of the job and then they got to figure out what to do with people who are kind of in this limbo that their case started in civil service, and now we got a police board. So who should hear that case, and what standards should they use to review those cases? But I hope the commissioners that we have now will take a look back at where the police board was at the end of the first iteration of state control, and understand that you can't just listen to the police chief. The board of police commissioners at the end they were a rubber stamp for Chief Isom, and it doesn't matter who the chief is. You have to provide some oversight, and I hope they give this police chief a free hand to do what he needs to do to take the streets back in St. Louis. But I don't want them to give him such a free hand that he becomes a monarch in the police department.
Yeah. No, I think that's great insight, and I think there's a balancing act that everyone's going to have to play. We're so far behind, even what we were whenever I left the department to now, and it seems like the only way to get back is just brute force, and that's not going to be the right answer either. It's going to take time. It's going to be years and years and years before we even get back to what we were 3 years ago.
Right. Well, and I think they showed this over the past weekend. A show of force is, you don't necessarily need brute force. A show of force downtown, and just saying enough is enough. Yeah. We're going to just lock everybody up and let the judges sort them out, and we're going to make a big spectacle of how many people we take to jail, and how little patience we're going to have for bad behavior. And I applaud the chief. I hear mixed reviews on this police chief.
There's a lot of mixed reviews,
But I applaud him for taking the bull by the horns and using this opportunity to have a bit of a free hand with this new police board that wants to see crime under control, to use that free hand in an aggressive way.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was actually going to bring that up here in a bit, but the whole 4th of July, it's always been a danger. Even whenever I was on, it's just there's the mixture of fireworks and gunfire. Right. You just don't know what's going on. But I thought that they took an interesting approach to it. And even some of my friends were very upset. And they felt like it was a smoke and mirrors kind of thing. Like, well, hey, we're doing this. And I don't think that that was necessarily the purpose of what they were trying to portray. They were basically saying, hey, this ends here. We're done. We're not even allowing fireworks on the streets. And Elliot Davis actually, I don't know if you saw this or not.
You know, I'm a big fan of Elliot's. I may be the only person in St. Louis who pulls out their phone and sees Elliot Davis's name on it is happy. You know, Elliot was a bit of a ball buster when he was a reporter, and you know, he came after people when he thought there was a story there. But you know, he's always treated me very fairly. He's always treated the police very fairly, and he's one of those good old timey reporters who would pick up the phone and just call and want background or, you know, some insight on a police story he's working on, just to, you know, sort of get the other side. You know, I spent a lot of time on the camera, but I spent a lot of time behind the camera, off the record or on background, just sort of, you know, filling in some of the blanks for reporters that, you know, we're only seeing a story from really one angle.
Elliot, so I think it was in 2018. Like I was a very new officer, and I don't even remember what it was, but I think like the county had been in a police shooting or something like that. And there was planned protests and stuff. Obviously, nothing ever happened from it, but Elliot had come out to District 6 to North Patrol, basically to talk about what we were doing to ramp up for possible protests and stuff like that. And he was out there recording stuff. And I remember my FTO and I were pulling out, and I'm like, oh man, like it's, you know, what's this about? This guy's recording. And
who's in trouble now?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So we're pulling past, and Elliot waves us down, and my FTO stops. I'm like nervous, like, oh, like we're not even allowed to talk to the media or something. And he puts his phone down and like just got real with us. He's like, hey, how are you guys doing? Like, how's your mindset? Like, that's who, you know, Elliot was. And after that, I was like, man, he's a great guy. But, you know, seeing that second post and him, that doesn't happen in reporting nowadays. Him coming back and saying, hey, I got this completely wrong. And I think that's almost how he started out. His first sentence of that post was, I got this completely wrong. I'm taking this back, you know, and I want to talk about what actually is going on. And
right. And it not only doesn't happen in reporting, it doesn't happen in our society. Like, we're in a society now where nobody admits they're wrong.
Absolutely.
Like it's, you know, a function of social media and not actually having to look a man in the face.
Right.
But I mean, that just tells you what a good man Elliot is. That he can actually walk back his original statements and say, you know, hey, I looked at this again and I talked to some people and now I'm seeing this from a different angle. Yeah. And I've always thought Elliot was an all-star journalist and a really good man. Yeah.
I think that's something that we're missing in today's, especially in media, but everywhere. So
I'll tell you, like, when you do a story with a old-timey reporter like Elliot or you know, Robin Smith when she was still reporting, like, they would ask 2 or 3 questions, they'd be done. Yeah. Like these new reporters, you'd be on camera with them for 20, 25 minutes, and they'd be like, well, what'd you do last summer? You're like, they didn't know what question they wanted to answer. Like these old-timey reporters knew what question they wanted to answer. As soon as you got the quote that they were looking for, which they usually got in 2 or 3 questions, they were done. They had it, and you were done, and the story was a better packaged story. Yeah.
Yeah, you just don't see that anymore. Thinking about that now. So let's talk a bit more about your time in the association. I know there was a lot of stuff done whenever you were down there, and I hear a lot of the guys talk about it and stuff. So let's just talk about some of the stuff that you did down there.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, you know, Ferguson had, you know, we never really got a chance to take a breath. It was like, you know, getting that contract done, going from state control to city control, you know, getting acclimated into all that. And then Ferguson happened, and then Stockley happened, and then George Floyd happened. And, you know, it was triage. I mean, it was just like the crisis du jour that you had to deal with. And, you know, and in the middle of all that, you know, a union is about member services, and, you know, members would call every day and say, hey, this happened. Should I file a grievance?
Right.
Like, what do I do? And I think the police chiefs that were there when I was with the union and the mayor's office, they probably all thought I was filing grievances willy-nilly left and right. Like the number of people who I said, that's not a grievance. A union contract is an agreement between the employer and the collective of employees about work conditions. It's not about whether you and your sergeant can't get along or whether you think they treat one guy better than they treat another guy. That's not a grievance. That's a whine. Like, and not that it's not serious, but it just didn't elevate to that. And I would call their captain and say, hey, this isn't something we'd file a grievance over normally. I really wish you'd handle this at the district level. Can we do something to address this? And sometimes there was, sometimes there wasn't. But the number of issues that we either just told the member, hey, be a man, grow up, or went and got it settled at the supervisor level or the captain level. It was way bigger than the number of grievances we filed or demand letters. That stuff was when there was just nothing else left to do.
Right.
But the whole Ferguson thing, it was really it's the most difficult time for American law enforcement, and you're kind of I think the offshoot of that story is the change in the way society sees police and the anti-police sentiment that drives a lot of this violence towards police.
I remember, with Nate and I shooting specifically, there was a lot of investigative work, obviously, but there was 4 guys in the car. 3 out of the 4 guys said the guy that shot Nate and I was adamant on killing police officer. Like he stated that multiple times. He made that very clear, and I've always thought about that, but I also have told people that because I feel like people don't understand that that's kind of the thought now. And that didn't used to be the thought, even 5, 6, 7 years ago. I don't think that was always a thing, but some of the modern day criminals now, I think that's kind of been placed into their minds of that it's either they shoot it out with us or, that's just kind of how it is.
Really, and really without any, consideration for the consequences. I mean, that guy didn't think he was going to shoot you guys and kill you guys and live through it. He just didn't care. That's how much hatred is built up in the heart of some folks as a result of what I think is really a false narrative on what happens between American law enforcement and American citizens, and of course I talk about it a lot in the book. But there's think about this. There's over a billion police interactions with citizens every year in the United States. There's 750,000 police officers in the United States. Interacting with the citizens 10 times a day for 365 days. It's over 1 billion interactions between law enforcement and American citizens every day. Consistently, before Ferguson, after George Floyd, consistently, American law enforcement takes the lives of about 1,000 people every year. Yeah. Is that too many? Yes. The perfect number would be 0, but that's an impossible number. So 1,000 out of 1 billion end in the bad guy dying. About 350 a year end with the cop dying.
Yeah.
But the staggeringly small size of that number of bad outcomes, and I'm not saying that 1,000 of those are bad outcomes. I mean, even the liberal Washington Post, who's appointed themselves the record keeper for police shootings, agrees that at least 90, more like 95% of police shootings are unquestionably justified.
Right.
There's only 5% that there's even a conversation to be had. Yeah. So now you're down to 50 out out of a billion, do you know how many people die of medical error in the United States every year?
I don't, but I'm sure. Yeah.
According to the Mayo Clinic, it's between 250,000 and 400,000 people die from medical error in the United States every year. Now, I don't know how many medical procedures there are every year, but
Right.
if there's a billion of those, like, we got a much better batting average,
Yeah.
and it's not even close. It's like people should be protesting in front of hospitals, not police stations. And those are mistakes.
Yeah.
Like, again, 1,000 people, it's not a great number, but most of them are unavoidable. They're not mistakes. They're just bad outcomes.
Working in the city, especially on the north side, you see a lot. I mean, it's like you're drinking from a garden hose when you first start out, instantly. And I try to explain to people where I live. I live in a small town in Illinois. I try to explain to them how policing in the city is, and we're just an hour away, and all of this stuff happens. And I think one of the things that I've come to realize, especially explaining people that don't have an understanding of how this kind of stuff goes, I tell them, I was shot, and I fired my gun. And guess how many times I fired my gun in 4 years? That time. But guess how many times I interacted with people that had guns on them? Mm-hmm. All the time. Right. I mean, there was probably, I would say, in one work week, especially in the summer, at least twice in one work week in the summer. I would say in the winter, obviously, you slow down a lot more. And I was arresting those people. And that's just me. And I wouldn't even say I was phenomenal at it. There was guys that were so much better at talking to people and finding that kind of stuff than I was. I was just an average police officer doing that every day. And that was, I only fired my gun once. And I think that's a testament to, I'm not even trying to testify my own case. That's a testament to officers just in the city, but also a lot of officers. I mean, there's a lot of officers that interact with people in bigger cities like that all the time.
You would have thought that the protesters had invented the word de-escalate. It's like, man, we've been figuring this out. We are the vanguards in de-escalation. Yeah. And law enforcement just constantly, and before Ferguson, this isn't an outcome of Ferguson. Mm-hmm. This is American law enforcement for the last 100 years. It has been in constant self-examination and figuring out a way to de-escalate. Like, there's nobody that does it better. Like, to your point, like, every one of those could end up badly. Like, you see a bulge in someone's pants and they make a furtive movement, and now you're shooting and the guy's dead and you've got a questionable shoot. Like, the restraint and the tactics that we've developed in law enforcement in America are just stunning, and the result is stunning. That all the violence that's pointed at law enforcement in this country and pointed at citizens in this country is only, and I know that's 1,000 mothers without their sons, but only results in 1,000 fatal police shootings a year. Right.
Yeah, I mean that's a big testament. And I don't think anyone ever sits down and looks at the numbers. They just see, the case by case incident, and they think, oh, well, this one's bad, and that's just kind of how it ends. And then we have riots.
Well, and so many fatal police shootings are suicide by cop now too. Like, I mean, you could take the suicide by cop out, where the guy just couldn't bring himself to press the barrel against his own temple and wanted someone else to do it. Like, that number gets substantially lower. Yeah. And we see when we wait to collect all the information in incidents like the Ferguson shooting and so many others, that the cops did it right, that that the person who ended up on the wrong side of that encounter could have chosen any time to stop, to just comply and take their chances in court. And I think that's the same thing that happened in George Floyd's case. Yeah. The cop tactics were horrible. Yeah. But they followed the department policies. That
Yeah.
you know the neck restraints were still in the books in Minneapolis,
Yeah.
and they were still teaching in the police academy. It was a horrible outcome. The cop was a dipshit for the way he conducted himself, but
Yeah.
did he commit a crime? Could George Floyd have just said, "I'll get in the back of this police car now"?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, and I think that's kind of how I've always viewed that, was that, and especially whenever it first happened. I was overseas when this all happened. I actually never, as a cop, never was actually had stood on a riot line.
yeah, well, you're lucky.
I know, I'm very lucky, and I was overseas with the National Guard for this, and all my buddies are coming up and showing me, like, what do you think about this? And I was like, well, there's two ways to look at it. I said, 100%, I feel like things could have went a lot different on both sides.
Right.
You could have pulled the guy up and got him in the car, but I also know that the cop was probably thinking in his head, like, there's all these people, if those agitators hadn't have been there, I think things would have been 100% different. Yep. You get up and move that guy a lot quicker than you did right then. And
if they had a cruiser quicker,
yep.
If they had an ambulance, they asked for an ambulance right away.
They did.
I don't know if you, like, a lot of people miss that, and like, I watched the tape several times.
Yeah.
And they asked for an ambulance immediately because the guy's skitzing out on dope, and it was clear to them that he was.
Yep.
And it's the same thing in St. Louis. You spend the rest of your life waiting for an ambulance when they call for one up there.
Yep.
We got 7 or 8 ambulances on in a town that leads the nation in murders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was definitely a recipe for disaster. You take some cops that probably weren't the best trained, some bad police tactics being taught, and a high crime neighborhood. I mean, I don't know if the neighborhood was high crime, but the city itself not having ambulances and having the agitators come up right then and there was just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and and you talk about maybe a more experienced police. We both know police officers that are so good at de-escalating. They could have talked George Floyd into handcuffing himself and getting in the back of the police car.
Yeah.
There's cops that are that good, that have that gift. That's really a challenge for this new board of police commissioners. Is forget the number of police officers we lost, the institutional knowledge that's just so irreplaceable to have such a young police department and have so few guys who've lived through mistakes.
Yeah.
That's really what I think this city police department is missing. That's really hard to get back is that old salty, brackish cop that's got 35 years on, pulling a cigarette out of his mouth and saying, "Don't do that, kid." Just like knowing before you have even gotten an inch into that mess that you're about to get in, that it's going to be a shit show, and you
just let it be.
Take it a different direction.
Yep. Yeah. No, I completely and totally agree with that. There's a lot of guys walking away from the job right now at 20. They're not even getting vested. They're just see you bye. Right. And we're losing cops on the daily to other, PDs and stuff like that too. And hopefully the ship rights itself at some point. But
yeah, well, I mean, morale matters too, right? I mean, it used to be guys would stay 35, 40 years because they loved the job and they loved the people they worked with and they were treated okay by their bosses.
Yeah.
Now it's like 20 years in a day and you're gone. I mean, that extra 15 years that you got out of so many people that you don't get anymore really matters.
Yeah.
And, I just, like, you can replace the bodies and that's a challenge, but replacing the experience, I mean, that's a challenge of magnitudes for this police board.
Right. So adding everything up to your resume, you've also written a book.
I have, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what we can find in the book.
Well, it's one of only 3 interviews Darren Wilson did. Darren and I got fairly close during the whole Ferguson thing. So he did the interview with with ABC News, and then the one with the New Yorker, and then the one in my book. So it's only 3 interviews he's given to date. It's an unedited interview. You know, I there's a chapter where I talk about, you know, kind of dissect what he says, but I also just verbatim include in the interview, you know, in the book what was said in the interview. You know, and then it's just the rest of it's just perspective. You know, it's not meant to be, you know, I'm right and everyone else is wrong. It's just the way I saw the world changing during Ferguson, and you know, how I went. The book starts with me going to bed the day of the shooting, and having talked to guys that were at the scene. You know, and everyone said clean shoot, no big deal. And in there, you know, there was just that. There was a high-profile police shooting in Indiana, I think, right before that, and one in Milwaukee or somewhere. So there'd been a couple right before that of sort of high-profile police shootings, and I'm like, "Are we okay?" Oh yeah, completely clean shooting. And I wake up early the next morning to Chief Dotson, who was a police chief at the time, saying, "You had to send SWAT and uniformed cars out to Ferguson. It got really ugly last night." And I'm like, "Why?" And he's like, they've taken to the streets. And then, you know, watching the news coverage and seeing the whole thing unfold, and you know, his accomplice sort of telling the story that, you know, this hands up, don't shoot narrative that's been completely debunked. You know, that really fanned the flames. You know, I talk about the media in America and how I thought the media was very irresponsible in their reporting.
Influential, yeah.
You know, so but the book, I'm proud to see the end of the book. You know, because, you know, right in the beginning of a book, right in the middle of a book, that's the easy part. Right in the end's the hard part. But I try to strike an optimistic turn at the end of the book, and you know, I'll tell this story. So after I wrote the book, I wanted the Post-Dispatch to do a book review. They wouldn't do it. So then the police beat reporters weren't getting return phone calls from me. And they're like, "Why don't you call me back, Jeff?" And I'm like, "Why don't you ask the book editor why I'm not calling you back?" So they all lean on the book editor. The book editor, after months of refusing to review the book, has one of the reviewers review it. And he gave a really nice review. Levin is the guy's name that did the review. And the next 2 days were the most books I sold. I mean, you can say we're about Post-Dispatch, but they have a following, and you know, and getting that book review resulted in a lot of sales. So a few weeks later, I was at a fundraiser for a political friend in North St. Louis, and I'm standing there drinking a beer, and Bill McClellan from the Post-Dispatch, the longtime columnist, walks in, and he sees me in a room full of 100 people, and he makes a beeline for me. And he goes, "Jeff, I can't wait to read your book." And I'm like, "Oh, well, thanks, Bill." And he's like, "Yeah, Levin loved it, and he's the toughest book reviewer the Post-Dispatch has ever had." So it finally, like, this light bulb went off, and I thought, that lousy book editor wanted him to, she gave me to the toughest guy because she wanted him to pay on the book, and he ended up saying really nice things about it. And what he said at the end of the review was, doesn't matter which side of the Ferguson debate you're on, read this book, which I thought was really high praise and a very kind thing for him to say.
That is, that's a big deal. How long did it take you to write the book?
I guess it was about 4 months of writing. And I had insomnia at the time, you know, and I felt like I did my best writing, like, in the middle of the night, like right after I woke up. But, you know, then you go through editing and you know, everything you have to do to get the book between a couple pieces of leather. But people have asked me, why haven't you written a second book? And I said, because I've written the first book, because I know how hard it is now. Because I tortured over every word in this book, and I kind of had to go through it twice because I self-published through Amazon CreateSpace, and then I got picked up by WND Books and had to go through editing all over again. And you have the Chicago manual that all these editors go by, but man, they really get into some fierce debates over whether this should be a comma or a semicolon or an M dash or what have you. So I had to write 2 more chapters when WND picked me up, and then had to go through editing again. And there's a lot of sort of police talk in there, brusque, coarse talk, and the editor would send me back a chapter of edits, and after every foul language word I'd have in there, she'd say, "Must we?" or do we have to have this? And I'm like, yes, that's the audience for this book. Yes, we have to have a book that sounds like it was written by a cop, not an academic.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, thanks for coming on. It's been great.
Enjoyed it.
I've been wanting to get you on for a while, share your story. So you got a lot to share. A lot of behind the scenes, especially for the city police department, through some very crucial moments. So
yeah, I'm proud to have served the men and women of the police department, and it was a great experience.
We all appreciate you.
Thank you. That's very nice of you to say.